Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We meet under an unpleasant circumstance that this country is facing, a political impasse, just considering the violence that has broken out in these 4 constituencies where the elections has had to be postponed indefinitely. It must be an indictment, isn't it?
Not really. I come from that area myself. It has never been the intention of our constitution and all people of goodwill of this country that a political leader can use his tribesmen, in this case Honorable Raila Odinga, basically using his tribesmen and mobilizing them to, in 3.5 counties, to blackmail the other 43.5 counties. That was never the intention of our constitution, but he's tried to do it. Fortunately, we are a country of laws. The law provides that we can have the declaration of the win by the president, irrespective of the outcome of those particular counties, because they will not change the story. The elections were not ordered by Jubilee. The elections were ordered by the Supreme Court. And Jubilee had no alternative but to participate, and it is instructive that the Chief Justice himself, who was sitting in the bench that ordered the repeat elections, himself went and voted.
Mm-hmm. You use the word tribesmen to describe those who are supporting Raila Odinga, or those who are carrying out his instructions, not so far as going violent, because he's disputing that. He's saying that the people mustn't be violent, however, though there must be this civil disobedience. Why do you say tribesmen? Are you accusing him of using those from the certain tribe to create this political impasse?
Yes, and I happen to understand the language, and I come from the same village as him, 4 kilometers apart. And it is one thing to talk on the international media to tell people that he's told his followers not to be violent. He's told his followers publicly to go and pray and keep vigil. But what we've been seeing in the streets is not keeping vigil, it is not praying. There's one way of talking to the international community, and then when you go to the vernacular radio stations, you say something different, you wink.
Mm-hmm. So you're basically accusing him of inciting violence?
Yes. I'm not accusing him. It is the truth.
But inciting violence is a crime, isn't it?
Yes, it is a crime. And indeed, as I'm talking to you right now, we did have candidates, Jubilee candidates in that region. I'm in the process of trying to evacuate them from that area because they've been harassed for the last few days. Most of them are not sleeping in their home states. They are basically on the run. And I'm actually in the process of evacuating them from that area.
And in the process of laying a criminal charge against the Raila Odinga, because you are accusing him of a crime?
Yes, I think it is the responsibility of the government and of our courts to deal with it. Indeed, before we went to the elections, we did take him to court. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court did postpone the hearing of the case to 27th, which is after the election day. Of course, interestingly enough for us was that the Supreme Court found it fit to certify his own case against the holding of the elections to be more urgent, and that was supposed to be had on the 25th. But that is the irony of our judicial system. We did go to court to put a restraining order on some of his governors, specifically Governor Asanga, not to threaten people, not to harass them, not to stop them from going to vote. But the court ruled that that was the job of the police, and the police should go ahead and enforce the law.
Does this then at all mean that the Jubilee Party would have inadvertently then support an application at the ICC that that Raila Odinga and his running mate be charged and prosecuted at The Hague?
Well, we've had other initiatives of other groups thinking of doing that, but that is not the official Jubilee position.
It's not the Jubilee position.
No.
Let's speak about the turnout of these elections. As it stands at the moment, just above 40% of the people who have turned out of is it 16 million people who have registered to participate in the elections, registered voters. Does this mean that Uhuru Kenyatta does not have a clear mandate Because expectations are that when Chibokati makes the announcement, or would be Uhuru Kenyatta wins these elections. Is this a clear mandate, even though the turnout has only been just above 40%?
Indeed, a clear mandate, for a couple of reasons. First of all, in the elections held on the 8th of August, the Supreme Court accepted the argument by NASA that figures did not matter. They said what mattered was the process, and indeed the nullification was based on process. It is the height of hypocrisy that now we're being told about figures and we are not auditing the process. So one can't have their cake and eat it. But indeed, 40% turnout is fairly expected in a repeat election when one of the main contenders has actually pulled out. I mean, compare that with the case in France the other day when they had a runoff for the presidency. It was 36%. And the runoff involved the two people. And indeed, the current president of France is probably having a mandate to rule as president of France for the next 7 years with a 19% or 20% vote. Yeah. Go to the United States, 55.7% turnout. And indeed, President Trump trailed Hillary Clinton in terms of the popular vote by about 3 million. So Trump is the president of the most powerful country in the world with about, 26-27%. So I think if you understand those scenarios, then there's absolutely no reason for anybody to start talking about a 40% not being acceptable.
Even if you look at one of your closest neighbors, Her Excellency Ellen Sirleaf Johnson also suffered the same blow back in the 2011 elections and the rerun of those elections where the voter turnout was low. However, though, the question has always been amongst opposition parties as well as those who supported opposition parties in that country that there was a question or a cloud around her legitimacy to lead that country.
Well, interestingly, the media buy that story from the opposition. They can't eat their cake and have it. In the first place, they did not participate in the elections out of their own will. In fact, I'd like to say, as the Secretary General of the party, is that indeed, in August, we only had a confirmation of our win. We actually won this election in February this year. And February this year is when the IEBC finished the registration of voters. And like in any political arena, you do have some swing areas, some strongholds, and we had more people in our strongholds and areas which favor this president from the past experience that registered to vote. Indeed, we were about 1.2 million voters ahead, and we didn't spend any more time trying to mobilize our stronghold areas. We only worked on get out the vote exercise in those particular areas, and we went and raided the swing areas. So I can tell you that for as long as we have the same register, which was finalized in February this year, we can have the elections once, twice, thrice, 10 times, 1,000 times, the result will be the same. They will lose, and they know it.
Does that then mean that the Jubilee Party would be open to the suggestion that comes from NASA that let there be another rerun of the elections within 90 days?
Yes, if it's done within the law, we have no problem. He can go to Parliament and he can force a rerun. It is possible within our constitution to get a vote of no confidence.
Will you support it though? That's the question. Because having the option of going.
How can we support? In the sense that we have about 217 members of parliament. They have 117. We are almost double the number of parliamentarians they have. But if they think they can convince most of our parliamentarian members of
Is Jubilee
parliament
open to being convinced?
Well, they can convince our individual members, because really our members in parliament do have a certain amount of latitude. If they feel strongly that they want to pass a vote of no confidence in this president, hypothetically, it is possible. But for the rest, really, they're really just dreaming. He's lost this election. What he's trying is what he did after the 2007-2008 elections, when he was able to precipitate a crisis in the streets and, get the international community to come on board and try and cool the situation by insisting that we should have a government of national unity. He succeeded in that in 2007, 2008. This time it will not work.
It will not work.
So
the option of what he calls half a loaf is not open?
That is not open.
So he will not be prime minister?
He will not be prime minister.
There will never be a coalition government in Kenya as it stands? That
will not be necessary because we have 221 members of parliament on our side. He has 117. Why should we ask him to be a member of our coalition? Indeed, the whole point about an election is so that one party wins. The constitution envisages a 50+1 scenario, and whoever gets the 50+1 wins. In this particular case, we won with 54%, and so it was not just 50+1. The difference was 1.4 million, close to 1.5 million votes. If he doesn't want that kind of competition, and if some people don't want that kind of competition, then essentially it means that we have to change our constitution. We don't need to have elections. So that we just have a conference and decide who should rule the country.
In the interest of stabilizing this country, considering its economic importance to the region as well as to the continent, would Jubilee be open to discussions around a cessation? Let's divide this country and let NASA have its own rule in these counties where it says it has big support and let it have its own country. Is Jubilee open to such a suggestion?
Well, our constitution came up with a devolved system so that we have governors in 47 counties. And indeed, there are counties that are controlled by NASA, Kisumu, Siaya, all those areas where he was able to mobilize his tribesmen not to participate in the election, are counties that are governed by, by his party. The constitution describes Kenya as one country. If somebody wants to divide the country into 1 or 2 or 3 different pieces, then they have to go through the process of a referendum to get Kenyans to dissolve this republic.
You see, the problem with that is, even though Kenya is one country, it's not a united country. That is the issue that you face at the moment.
Well, I think that there's nothing peculiar about that. Indeed, we are different nationalities, so to speak. We have 42 different nationalities. We just acquired a 43rd one who had migrated from Mozambique, the Makonde community. And so actually we have 43 different nationalities, so to speak. But and indeed, Kenya is in a very unique position that actually we're not just 42 different nationalities, all the 4 or 5 different races, so to speak, converge in this country. There's no other country like that in the continent, where we have the Somalis who are more of Arabic stock, and then we have the Ethiopian part, who you have the people from Ethiopia who are really of a Hamitic Cushat block, and then we have the Nilotes like myself, and then we have the Bantus who came in from Congo. So you'll find in this country there are more people who understand the words in Xhosa and in Zulu than I'm able to understand. So we're a very, very mixed country, but so is the United States.
Yeah. No, that's the case.
Yes.
But would Uhuru Kenyatta be able to unite this country around national unity after these elections?
Yes.
Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible, and indeed that is the dream of Jubilee Party. Jubilee Party something like 13 different political parties, which were mainly ethnic parties, came together to form the Jubilee Party. I myself, I come from the same community as Raila Odinga, but I happen to be the Secretary General of Jubilee Party. And indeed, Raila Odinga has absolutely very dismal credentials with respect to democracy, because in his own backyard, any free-thinking people are not able to participate in the electoral process in that area, because he just visits violence on anybody who opposes him.
Just a final question before I let you go. The 4 constituencies that didn't participate in these votes, what do you think the IEBC's final decision should be on this impasse? Well,
there was a school of thought which felt that the government should ensure that they force open as many polling stations as possible. But then the other school of thought was that when there is a political movement which is trying to use the young people in that area as human shield, so that then the government going there would result in deaths of young people who have been radicalized, then there's absolutely no reason at all to insist on having elections in those areas, because the Constitution and the law provides that when it is clear that the numbers from that area will not in any way materially affect the final figure, then the Electoral Commission is at liberty to declare the results of the elections.
And which one of those two does Jubilee support?
Well, it's not our province to decide. That is the prerogative of the IBC, and whatever they decide we'll accept.
Well, thank you so much, Raphael Tuju, the General Secretary of Jubilee Party. As you've indicated there, that it is the decision of the IBC to make that final decision what happens to these 4 counties. As we've indicated before, that the IBC chairperson Chibukati has announced that that decision will be made today, so we expect that decision in a few hours from now.
Our reporter Aldrin Sampear there speaking to the Secretary General of the Jubilee Party, Mr. Raphael Tuju, as the Kenyan presidential election drama rages on. We'll leave it there for now. Let's go on to the weather desk.